Welcome back to another episode of HorseTube D&D. Sorry I've been so inconsistent lately in posting these, but I've been in the middle of a career transition and had my horsey oats nose deep in a Java development course. But I'm here now, so let's do some D&D. Today we're going to be talking about how to create a new character for D&D 5e. Start to finish, this horse will walk you through it all in character, and it's going to be a blast. If you want to follow along, you'll need a character sheet of some kind, at least one 6-sided dice or a d6, a pencil, and a bit of scrap paper. Now, let's get started. To outline this, we're going to figure out a few of the basics for what we want to play, sort out all of the numbers for that type of character, and then finish it off with an in-character interview to really flesh out who this character is. First up, we want to figure out what we want to play, our class. In general, you have a couple of main categories, but a lot of variety within them for flavor. You have magic casters such as wizards and clerics, martial fighters such as, fighters or monks, and then partial casters, characters that fit kind of halfway in between like druids and paladins. Start by figuring out what class you want to play, and either turning to your player's handbook to that page with the class on it, or just Googling it, because honestly, a lot of these are available online as well. Just be sure to only use official information unless your DM is okay with homebrew and checks out your specific chosen class first. Homebrew can kind of get weird and not all of it is really well made or balanced, so again, make sure you check with your DM first. For this walkthrough, we're going to assume that you'll be starting at level 1, and as an example, I'm going to make a monk. Now we'll need to pick a background. We'll come back to this in detail later, but whatever type of character you are going to be playing probably has an official background associated with it. Are you going to play a sailor? Easy. Playing a priest turned into a demon hunter? Yeah, piece of cake. What about someone who wandered the wilderness for decades, running from his fate? Or a child who wandered into a fairy ring and was kidnapped by the Fae? Yeah, those two. They're listed all over the place, with several more in every book released, as well as tons of custom options online, so just find the ones that you like and roll with it. For my monk, I'm going to go with a sailor. I'll expand more on this in a little bit. Now, what about race? That's a question that you rarely want to hear in real life, but it can be a lot of fun in D&D. There are the classic fantasy races to choose from, like dwarves, elves, there's so many elves, gnomes, and humans. But there are also some of the weirder favorites like plasmoids, or basically slime people, Harengon, rabbit people, or Gif, hippo people. For my example, I'll be making a plasmoid. Next is your alignment. Now, this isn't super important right now, but it will be a very useful guide for how your character should behave if you run into an unexpected situation. As someone who is neurodivergent, this comes in extremely handy in the rare event that I run into a situation I hadn't planned in advance for. More on the specifics of alignment in a different video probably, but for now, my monk will be a neutral good and tends to be a little bit pacifist, only fighting when necessary. This just kind of outlines the general way that your character handles different situations, what they tend to do. One note here, avoid falling into the lawful good or chaotic evil traps. While both of these alignments are perfectly fine, they are sometimes used as an excuse to treat other players and other characters poorly. Just remember that we're all here to have fun, so make sure not to ruin anyone else's fun with your fun. Now onto the crunchy bits, the numbers. Let's grab some dice, paper, and a pencil, and we will talk about the two main methods to get these oh-so-important numbers. Be sure to ask your DM which version of these you'll be using, but rolling is probably the most common method, so we'll start there. So grab 4 d6, or 4 of those dice that look like cubes and have 6 sides. You can also use just one of them and roll 4 times, or use a digital roller instead. There's honestly a lot of flexibility here, so just do whatever works. Now, we're going to roll these 4 dice, ignore the lowest number just like you ignored that F in high school art, and then add the top 3 together. Write that number down. This is going to be one of your stats, but you don't have to decide which stat just yet. Now, we're going to do that 5 more times for a total of 6 numbers. These will go on to be our stats and our ability scores, and eventually just about everything else. But for now, let's go ahead and talk about them just a little bit before we continue. Now, if you want an in-depth discussion, of the strategies and all the details on where to put these. There's dozens of excellent videos and honestly hundreds of websites with more data than your horsey heart could ever process. I know more than mine can anyway. So I'm going to keep this explanation short and sweet. Put the highest number into whatever your character needs to be good at. For my monk, that'll be dexterity. Put the second and third highest numbers into their constitution and whatever their second best stat is, if they have one. From there, just pick whatever feels right. The second main way to get these numbers is something called standard array. Basically everything that I said still goes, but instead of rolling the dice to get your numbers, you're simply going to use 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8 for those numbers. They're just the starting numbers. It's whatever he starts with. Then you're going to add your racial bonuses and proceed to the next step anyway. So there's a third secret way that we aren't really going to talk about today called point buy. Just know that it exists. It's really cool in theory, but honestly nobody uses it and it's kind of complicated for new players, so I'll save that for another video. Personally, half of my enjoyment in this game is just getting the chance to roll the dice, so I do that every opportunity that I can. Now, write all of these numbers in the small part of the corresponding boxes, typically found on the left-hand side of a paper character sheet, or at the top of the page in D&D Beyond's character creation screen. Don't forget to add your suggested racial bonuses here as well, or as of more recent 5e guidelines, just add +2 to one stat and +1 to another, or +1 to 3 separate stats. Again, these should go to whatever stats need to be the highest, balanced with Constitution. Now, one quick note here. While you totally could play a wizard with 6 intelligence or a fighter with 7 strength, if you're watching this video, you probably haven't played enough D&D to have fun with this type of comically bad character yet. It's a totally different kind of fun, and maybe we'll talk about that later, but for now, we're just going to try to make your character as good as they can be. We're basically halfway done now, or most of the way if you're using a virtual tool. So, what do we put in the big boxes? Well, those are our modifiers. Basically, 10 is considered an average number, and our modifiers is just half the distance between whatever our number is and 10, rounded down. Sound confusing? Well, let's take a look. So if we have a strength score of 13, we're going to go ahead and subtract 10 from that to get 3. Divide that by 2 and you'll get a 1.5 or plus 1.5. But then if we round that down, that becomes just a +1. We don't really have decimals. And we're going to write that +1 in. If we have a 7 intelligence score, we subtract 10 to get -3, divide by 2 to get a -1.5 modifier, and then we round that down to -2. Make sense? If it's a little too much math, don't worry, just check the handy table on page 13 or 173 of the player's handbook. Just a few more to go and we will be on to role-playing. Yep, that's right, this is another interactive role-playing video. But first, let's fill out the rest of the front page of your character sheet. Now, armor class is just how hard it is to hit you, which is typically 10 plus your dexterity modifier or whatever your armor says, if you happen to have armor. Initiative, that's just how fast you react, and it's typically just your dexterity modifier. Now, I say typically because there are a few things that can affect these, but we're going to ignore those for now. They will just be listed under your class. There's a reason we're filling out everything in pencil though, and that's because there are little things that we will change as we go. Your hit dice, that's just whatever it says under your class. If you can't find it listed anywhere, then it's probably a D8, like a 75% chance. Honestly, almost everything's a D8. Your level 1 hit points is just the maximum of whatever your dice is, plus your Constitution modifier. This is why Constitution is one of the most important stats, so no matter what class you play, the Constitution is what keeps you alive. Now, let's tackle those massive lists down the middle-ish of your character sheet. Saving throws and proficiencies. And then we'll be virtually done. If you're starting at level 1, your proficiency modifier is +2. This goes up by a point every couple of levels. Check your player handbook on page 15 or Google it for the details as you level up. Now, check your class and choose a few of whatever saving throws and proficiencies it allows you. Put a mark by those in those handy little bubbles. I like to fill mine in entirely like a Scantron, but honestly a check mark or an X will do just fine. Next up, do the same thing with backgrounds, which will also have a few small perks associated with them, but typically just a few additional proficiencies. Check those off too. Now, go down the entire column, starting with saving throws and then proficiencies, and put whatever your stats modifier is into that space, adding your proficiency modifier to it if it's checked off. What that ultimately means is just that these are areas your character is currently skilled in and will do better than average at. Starting equipment, languages, and others will mostly be listed under your class. Write those down in the bottom left corner. Most have a couple of different options and provide some flexibility. Choose the basics or ask your DM if you have any specific limitations here. And now on to spells. If you started as a spellcaster of any kind, you'll have to pick and fill in your spells and spell slots. The rules for each class vary a good bit, so just follow the guides for whichever class you chose. Generally, you get a few cantrips or level 0 spells, as they're likely to be called in the near future, and maybe a couple of level 1 spells as well. Cantrips can be cast as much as you like. Level 1 and higher spells are limited by the spell slots that you have available, which is basically just a representation of your magical stamina. Now, these vary by class, so check the rules for your specific class before you mark down exactly what you want. Now, onto some of my favorite parts. Backstory, bonds, flaws, appearance, and all the gritty personal stuff that takes your character from being Wizard McWizardface and turns them into a real character with hopes and dreams, fears and losses. For this part, I want to get a little bit intimate. That's right, it's time for some roleplay. The town guard directs you to the closest tavern as the gates of the city close behind you. The wet night air is cold as you pull your hood just a little bit further down to keep the rain out of your eyes. It's a few minutes' walk, but pretty soon you're at the door of a small rain-soaked building made of brick and wood. You push the door open with a creak, only to be met by warm firelight, cheerful chatter from a half a dozen customers or so, and a blue dragonborn bartender chatting it up with a gnomish guest as they exchange coin. What would everyone see as you entered the inn? What do you look like? What are you wearing under your soaked rain cloak? Do you swing the door hard or do you open it gently? Take a moment to ponder and answer these questions. You walk up to the bar and take a vacant seat as the gnomish customer brushes past you on his way to the door. "Hi, welcome to the Maw of the Mountain. Finest food and drink this side of the divide," says the sloth blue dragonborn. "You don't look like a local. Are you passing through, or are you staying for a while?" Now, this is your chance to answer some questions in character. I'll give you a few moments. "Wonderful. Well, you're always welcome here at the Maw for as long as you're in town," she says. "Now, what can I get you? Meat, veggies, or both?" That one's your turn again. Answer what your character would eat. "Good call. Now, I'm curious. Whereabouts do you hail from? I doubt you're used to all this rain like we're getting out here. What's it like in your hometown?" "Well, here's your order," she says, putting a plate of food and a glass down in front of you. "I hope you like it. We pride ourselves on having quality ingredients and one of the finest local cooks. But enough about me. Why are you in town? I apologize if I'm getting too personal here, but why'd you strike out on this journey? You must have had a very good reason." That's quite an interesting reason. Well, if you need a room, we have plenty available, and there's plenty of supply shops in town for just about anything you could need. And let me know if you need a refill on that drink. You continue chatting and drinking for the next hour or so before you finally retire to one of the offered rooms, having received a warm welcome and a warm meal. Also, you should know a bit more about your character now, but if you're still not sure, you can tweak things around as you go. These questions should provide you a solid starting point, like where are you from? Why are you an adventurer? What do you eat and drink? What's the weather like back home? These are a blend of questions that should help you give your character some ideals, a voice of their own, and some flavor. Now we just have to take what we came up with here and translate it into personality traits, ideals, bonds, or people, places, and events that we have ties to, flaws, things that you're bad at or might cause you trouble, and a backstory. None of these things should be written in stone, so don't worry if you feel like you need to tweak a little bit here and there, or even if you're 3 months into your game and something that you wrote today really doesn't feel right. Just communicate with your DM and adjust things as needed. This is really just a starting point. It's all just a game. It's all just a game of make-believe, so just have fun. Now, I hope you had as much fun listening to this as I did making it, and don't forget to like and subscribe so that this beautiful blue dragonborn doesn't cook me up next. And, this horse is gonna run. Bye!